Channel 4 News, Dallas-Fort Worth. With Clarice Tinsley, Steve Bosch, James Spann in the Channel 4 weather station, and Paul Crane on sports.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up. 1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance.
We will not speculate as to the specific cause of the explosion based on that footage.
Obviously a major malfunction.
It began as a routine launch of an American space shuttle, no big deal. 24 times before, these space trucks had jumped into space.
But today it was not routine. 1 minute and 12 seconds into the mission, an explosion. The worst accident in American space history.
7 astronauts have perished, one of them the nation's first teacher astronaut. The loss felt around the nation, indeed around the world tonight. Texas has suffered a special loss. Houston is a focal point of the American space effort. Clarice Tinsley is standing by live at the Johnson Space Center. She has been covering this story from that perspective throughout this day. Clarice?
Thank you, Steve. The Johnson Space Center not only monitors space flights, it also serves as a center for research and development for future space missions, such as the space station. It's home to NASA management. It's home to the astronauts. On this night, which should have seen the 25th shuttle mission in space, the mood here is somber. The American flags at half-staff on the grounds of the Johnson Space Center bear silent testimony to today's tragedy. The center complex is virtually deserted tonight. Only a skeleton crew is at work. Mission Control Center, which would have monitored the shuttle flight, is now a locked, silent tomb. NASA public information officers all declined to go on camera for interviews, but they do say they and some managers are the only NASA employees working here tonight. The managers are evaluating today's pre-flight data, flight data, films, notes, and computer readouts in an effort to begin to unravel the mystery of the shuttle explosion. Tonight there are 250 members of the media at work at the Johnson Space Center. If this had been a normal launch day, officials say only 75 members of the media would be here. The space age brought Houston the Astrodome. It brought Houston the astronauts, members of the proudest family of the city of Houston. And tonight, residents here are mourning the loss of part of their proudest family members.
Called the Outpost Tavern. It sits appropriately just off NASA Boulevard, just a mile from the Space Center. It is the astronaut hangout. They say here even space heroes need a place to unwind.
There's a great loss there, Matt. One that came in and said, you know, I don't want anything to eat. And I said, I sat there and I watched it this morning and said I just broke down and cried. And this was not a little man that said that.
Gene Ross owns the Outpost and can tell you stories about the astronauts like they were just everyday patrons. Gene Ross, they were. Astronaut Allison Onizuko's picture is autographed, and behind the bar, he would bring Ross macadamia nuts from Hawaii. He was one of the astronauts killed today. Here, the right stuff was lived, and today, several members of that elite corps perished. Suzanne Langhorn is a kindergarten teacher with a special interest in today's would-be launch of a teacher into space.
All the time. I've seen them in here, lots of astronauts all the time. I've been here like to study for a test. I was in here before tests, and they helped me, like drilled me for my questions on my test. They're just regular guys, but then again, there are national heroes.
Ironically, the next shuttle crew had scheduled a party here tomorrow night to celebrate this mission and get ready for their own. The men and women on the wall of the Outpost still need a place to unwind tonight. Remember the good times and the great flights.
They were the kind of people that, if they were here to say something to us, you know, we have to go on, and it's just one of those things that happen.
You know, Clarice, Houston has lost a lot tonight. The Outpost Tavern has lost a lot tonight, but we've all lost. I was thinking all day today, being down here, that one of my most cherished stories that I've ever covered was the launch of the first space shuttle, the Columbia. And when it came back through Austin on its way back to Cape Canaveral, I got an autographed picture from the crew, and And it's made me do a lot of thinking today, and I think all of us across Texas and in Dallas are remembering the Space Shuttle program for a lot of nice memories tonight. Clarice?
3,200 people work here at the Johnson Space Center. Tomorrow they will come back to work, and all of them hope that their efforts will in some way lead to answers to today's tragedy. I'll be back later in this newscast. Steve?
All right, Clarice, thank you very much. Shortly after the shuttle broke apart, 4 of the Navy's faster frigates, 5 Coast Guard vessels, including the cutter Dallas, and 5 aircraft scoured a 1,200-square-mile area off the Cape. Here's more on the search efforts from Steve Dawson in Florida.
To say that 7 people died in the fiery explosion of the Shuttle Challenger this morning somehow isn't saying enough. For the people of Florida, anyway. They mourn those deaths, as does the rest of the nation, but there is something different. This is a state that either dies or thrives on national attention. Its citizens point with pride to Disney World, but it is to NASA, the Kennedy Space Center, the space program, and Cape Canaveral they point with pride. After all, it's not every state that can boast of being associated with the space program and exploring what lies out there. So it is different for the people of Florida. Even so, the focus is shifting now towards causes and remains. NASA has an evacuation plan, an emergency plan, in case the shuttle has to abort and is forced to land at sea. That plan was delayed for several minutes this morning because debris from the explosion continued to fall into the Atlantic Ocean for as long as 45 minutes. We're told tonight, though, that searchers have spotted pieces of the explosion and of the shuttle 5 to 10 feet long and a couple of feet wide. Those pieces will be taken to a hangar at Patrick's Air Force Base, where scientists will begin their examination into the causes of this morning's explosion. Steve Dawson, Channel 4.
Today's shuttle disaster had another impact tonight. For the first time in U.S. history, the White House canceled a scheduled State of the Union address, postponing it until February the 4th. President Reagan chose instead to express sadness and condolences to the astronauts' families in a live broadcast this afternoon. Here at home, an interfaith memorial service will be held for those killed aboard the Challenger at Thanksgiving Square shortly after noon tomorrow in Dallas.
Well, I'm hoping that as they look at me and they see what I've accomplished, because I just took that chance.
Hello, Linus. I see your blanket's out for washing. I feel so insecure. Security is why over 43 million people trust Metropolitan to ensure their lives and health and homes and cars and retirement. Does Metropolitan give out blankets? No, but the world-famous Metropolitan Life Representative is the very symbol of security in an uncertain world. You're right. I feel better already. Get Met. It pays.
How often should you have your brakes checked? As often as you have your teeth cleaned. And that's the point. Most people don't think about brakes until they know there's something wrong with them. By that time, the problem is usually more serious than it would have been with regular checkups. Don't wait for your brakes to tell you there's something wrong. Bring your car to Bill King's Braco for a free brake inspection. If you have a problem, we'll show it to you. Think of it as preventive medicine. The free brake inspection from the specialists at Bill King's Braco.
You can find advertisements for miracle cures almost anywhere, giving promises to cure anything from baldness to arthritis. And it's estimated that Americans spend $10 to $20 billion a year on these products.
You're supposed to wear them twice a day for an hour each time, in the mid-morning and the mid-afternoon. And the pounds just melt away.
Are they too good to be true? Find out in the special report, Health Fraud, this week at 6. We're in touch with your concerns on Channel 4 News.
A tremendous explosion in space, 7 lives lost. And ever since the tragic news was announced, we all mourn. The destruction of the Challenger space shuttle has had an effect on just about everyone, young and old. Like other cities in America, the people here in the Metroplex are in mourning tonight.
The expressions of our loss. As we all awaited every tidbit of information, so much of our thoughts have been for the young people. The young who sat in classrooms watching history in the making. The young who have their own aspirations. Aspirations that were kindled by the school teacher turned celebrity.
It really struck me then, almost like a death in the family, because I'm so close to the program itself.
Richard Wharton doesn't simply aspire to be an astronaut. This 16-year-old has already begun his training. 2 years at Space Camp, a member of the Young Astronaut Program, and recipient of the Boy Scout Space Exploration Merit Badge. Richard doesn't just simply aspire to be an astronaut. He knows that someday he will fly in space.
It's brought down the risks. It's brought them home to me. I think that I'm going to continue to go ahead with it because I know that things like this will happen.
As all of Dallas-Fort Worth grieved the loss of the 7 crew members aboard the shuttle, city officials found themselves directing their thoughts to the children as well.
I think they can get a good example from courage and competence and the commitment of these men and women of the crew. They gave their lives for their country and for the world in terms of the importance of space exploration.
What has happened today has indeed touched us all and made us contemplate the future of space exploration.
I think their lives wasn't all in vain. I think it was probably worth it. That's the way they would have felt, I think.
I think that's proof that they're trying to expand their goals and trying to reach them too fast. Because I think with all the checks and stuff that they're supposedly supposed to have, people on different computers and stuff, something like that shouldn't happen.
It took a lot of bravery to attempt to do what they've done. And my heart goes out to them.
Stephanie Lucero, Channel 4 News, Dallas.
The sorrow of Challenger's loss reached the nation's capital. Prayers on the floor of the House of Representatives. A special resolution passed expressing sympathy to the families of those brave astronauts. Among those expressing grief and hope, Texas Senator Lloyd Bentsen.
Setback for our space program. But right now you can't help but think about the risks that you have as you break through these new frontiers and the kind of price that's paid by these people who commit their lives to trying to help in that regard. So we have our pro-share heroes in this country of ours, and our love and our sympathy and our concern goes out for the members of those families.
Utah Senator Jake Garn, the first politician in space, expressed his sorrow, but Garn said he'd go up again tomorrow if NASA would let him. We call it the Space Shuttle, but it is actually a space truck, a workhorse in space, with each flight more and more commercial applications, slowly moving earthbound factories out beyond the clouds. Businessmen here in Dallas are counting on NASA to continue the vital shuttle program, despite today's disaster.
19 years ago Monday, another disaster shocked America and threatened its space program. 3 astronauts died on the launching pad, incinerated in their space capsule. A lengthy investigation into why they died found safety flaws and prompted major design changes. But the program went on, and less than 3 years later, in July 1969, American astronauts for the first time walked on the moon.
Man's on the way to the stars. I think it would be right and proper that we investigate the cause of this accident, and let's make sure as best as we possibly can keep it from happening again. But to suggest in any way it's going to do anything but just slow it down temporarily, I don't think would be correct.
These 2 men are part of the North Texas Space Business Roundtable, one of only 4 such chapters in America. Houston, Washington, and Austin are the others. The Roundtable is interested in the vast commercial possibilities of space, like the Space Shuttle launch satellite that takes pictures for Sun Oil in Dallas, pictures analyzed in the search for oil and gas. From satellites to Teflon frying pans, NASA research has changed all our lives in 1,000 ways.
The great fortunes and the great industrial empires of the 21st century are being born today, and a major part of what they do will be aerospace. Space will be occupied. Space will be conquered. You cannot hold back technology. You cannot hold back the onward march of man. If the United States doesn't do it, someone else will.
However long this sets the space program back, Roundtable members are convinced of its long-term potential for commerce, for profit. And they're determined to get a larger piece of the action for Dallas and North Texas. Richard Ray, Channel 4 News.
There is some speculation tonight that the weather at Cape Canaveral might have played some small part in today's accident.
Well, Suzanne, it was unusually cold in Cape Canaveral this morning. In fact, they were below freezing, which is very unusual for that part of Florida. And we'll talk about the weather during the launch this morning and have a look at our forecast also coming up next.
smokers, this is new Favor. It's a smoke-free cigarette. That's right, a smoke-free cigarette. You don't light it. It doesn't burn. You just inhale. And exhale. You get tobacco pleasure and satisfaction. But what you don't get is smoke. And neither do the people around you.
New Favor. Cigarette satisfaction. No smoke.
In the continuing battle among Dallas area dealers to sell you a car or truck, your gold medal Chevy dealer, Stately Chevrolet, declares Price War. Price War. Price War. Stately Chevrolet answers the pricing challenge with all-out war, and you're the winner. We can save you money on the new Chevy car or truck you want now. So why settle for less? Go for the gold. At your gold medal Chevy dealer, Stately Chevrolet Subaru.
This Wednesday on PM Magazine, it's party time in Rio de Janeiro, and the party queen, Anna Maria, shows what it takes to make even the host feel like a treasured guest.
Everybody came to me asking to do the more different things you can imagine.
She takes care of everything from the celebrity guest list to the food and wine and even security. Then these roommates have more than just beauty in common. They're Miss Universe and Miss USA, and they tell what it was like to compete against each other in the Miss Universe pageant. Join Deborah DeYoung for PM Magazine Wednesday afternoon at 3 on Channel 4.
I'm Carol Burnett. As you probably know, our nation is now in a medical emergency. AIDS is a serious disease, threatening the well-being of every man and woman. With your help, our scientists can find an effective treatment and hope to develop a vaccine. Please, join with me in supporting the American Foundation for AIDS Research. Our gifts, even small ones, can add up to hope. Write to AIDS Research, New York, 10116. Thank you.
KDFW TV, Channel 4, Dallas-Fort Worth.
Of course, the cause of this morning's tragedy is not known tonight, but there is some speculation that possibly the weather had something to do with it. The very cold air in Florida this morning. Here's a look at our national map, and the shaded area there represents the southeastern part of the country where record lows were set this morning, all the way from Virginia southward, all the way down to Miami, Florida. Some specific low temperatures this morning included 38 degrees down at Miami Beach, 35 degrees at Fort Lauderdale, 26 back at Orlando and Tampa, and Cape Canaveral had 30 this morning, and they had temperatures below freezing for at least 5 hours. And there were visible icicles on parts of the shuttle this morning before launch. These particular pictures were made early this morning in the pre-dawn hours in that part of the Atlantic coast of Florida. And, of course, you can clearly see those icicles. And, again, it's very speculative at this point to determine if that had anything to do with the crash this morning or the explosion, but certainly that's something that folks will have to be looking at for the next several days. All right, here's the national satellite view this evening. Clear skies all across the southern part of the country. Dry air continues across Texas, and temperatures were markedly warmer today. We saw highs in the 70s, where yesterday we just saw highs in the 40s. And it looks like we'll have above normal weather for much of the week, with afternoon highs mostly in the 60s. A weak front coming through tomorrow, giving us a wind shift, northerly winds once again, but temperatures only about 5 to 10 degrees cooler than what we saw today. Looking further west, possibly the relief from the dry weather is in sight. Back in the Pacific Ocean, a cold front there should be affecting Texas by the latter part of this coming weekend. 10 o'clock, 59 degrees, the humidity 57%, the pressure falling, winds out of the south at 15 miles an hour. 72 was the high today. It was 33 this morning, and no rain recorded since midnight last night. Now here's the forecast for tonight. Mostly fair skies for all of North Texas with an overnight low near 48. Then for tomorrow, it should be a nice day, mostly sunny, but somewhat cooler with north winds and a high of 69. In Channel 4's 5-day forecast, again, maybe by Sunday we'll break that dry spell with a chance of scattered thunderstorms. In the meantime, quite warm. In fact, on Saturday afternoon, we should see a high temperature near 80 degrees. But for now, Suzanne, this is the 48th consecutive day without rain. Forest fires continue to be a problem, but hopefully by Sunday we'll be able to break that.
I certainly hope so. Thank you, James.
She was a teacher, and she wanted to be an astronaut. There was no doubt in the minds of her family, friends, and students that Christa McAuliffe was the #1 choice for the Teacher in Space program. Her enthusiasm and smile carried her through the NASA selection process, and it made her an American symbol, not only as the first private citizen astronaut, but a leader in education.
During the summer, when I had been selected as a teacher in space, and I feel that it's such a great honor, but I'm so delighted to be representing my profession. I mean, it means so much to me to see teachers being looked
Concord, New Hampshire schoolteacher never mentioned the potential dangers of the space flight. The 37-year-old mother of two was picked among tens of thousands of applicants. McAuliffe called her accomplishment only a footnote in history. But today, she and 7 other shuttle astronauts left an eternal memory in the minds of millions across the world.
With us now, a man who played a role in selecting Christa McAuliffe to be America's first teacher astronaut.
Dr. Richard Berenson was a member of the national panel that reviewed several thousand teacher applicants. Dr. Berenson, thank you for being with us tonight. Let me ask you first about Christa McAuliffe. What can you tell us about her and the selection process?
Well, first of all, there were many thousands of people across the country who wanted to be the first teacher-naut, as it was called. Finally came down to 114 national finalists, and she ultimately emerged. She was clearly an outstanding teacher, and most of all, a good communicator. She could speak well on radio, television, or with the print, and she had a real devotion to her children.
Obviously, today's accident was a tremendous shock to everyone involved, including NASA personnel. How serious of a setback is this going to be to the entire shuttle program?
Well, it's clearly going to require NASA to re-examine to find what the cause of the problem was, but I hope it does not stall or halt or certainly end the space program. It must not do that. We are now like in the voyages of discovery centuries ago. We have to continue. 1986, in fact, could turn out to be the most important year in space in all of time.
Teacher Barbara Morgan, next in line. What could you tell us about her?
Super person. She comes from Idaho, Stanford graduate, Phi Beta Kappa, incredibly bright. Teaches third-grade youngsters. Speaks something like 3 or 4 languages, very poised, and will certainly be a super replacement.
I have another question about Christa McAuliffe. I realize it's impossible to really know her that well, but if you could you tell us what you think she would have wanted us to talk about her, to remember her for?
Well, it's hard to know, but I did spend some while talking with her. I was very impressed by her. Was a dedicated teacher. I think, frankly, she would want to turn today into a teaching exercise. She would want the youngsters to learn from it, to learn something about the fragility of humankind, how our technology can even fail us, and yet the resiliency that the American people have as we pick up and go on. I'm sure she would make it a lesson.
I can't let you go without asking you about the children. As an educator, 2.5 million children were waiting for this classroom from space. What about them? What about that?
It must have jolted them hard. I suspect they'll remember it all their lives, and someday when they are 70, 80 years old, maybe they'll look back and remember that they were there at the early days in the same way that airplanes went down in large numbers when the airline industry was just beginning. This is the birth of a new industry. It's the birth of a new thing. And there will be some losses. It's sad, but it's true. Nonetheless, we'll continue, and eventually we will excel.
Dr. Berenson, thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Today, students across the country cheered at the sight of the first teacher in space, but those cheers turned to moans of disbelief as the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded before their very eyes. The disaster became a lesson in courage and a real-life test of grief.
Shocked. It seemed so unreal. It seemed like everybody kind of took it for granted that the space program would, it would always be fine.
I really think it shouldn't set it back. They should try to overcome this disaster and not let it. Use it as a stepping stone. Everybody's just like, they're all just falling apart, all the teachers and everything.
I don't ever want to go there. It's been proven unsafe.
Psychologists say that children deal with such disaster best if it is shared openly, both at school and at home. To sports. What do you got for us tonight, Paul?
Well, a big story out of the NFL in New England. The Patriots have adopted a drug testing program, ramifications of which could be felt all the way back to Dallas. We'll talk about that, and we'll meet a young man who brings a bright light to a dark day. Next, in sports.
The new 5000 series from Audi. The 5000 Turbo Quattro, Turbo, Sedan, Wagon. 5,000 reasons to own an Audi. Make that 5,001. Now available with anti-lock braking systems.
And now extended through January 31st, you can lease this 1986 Audi 5000S for $305 a month.
Crime.
6 out of every 10 crimes committed in Dallas is by repeat offenders.
Many times they're back on the street before he's finished the paperwork.
And punishment.
We're sending people back on the streets who, again, assault, who murder, who attack,
You hurt people.
We can never build enough prisons. We can never hire enough guards. We can never hire enough probation officers.
Channel 4's Richard Ray examines crime and punishment in Dallas and what you can do to fight back. This week at 10 on Channel 4 News.
Last year, child abuse and neglect claimed more lives than infectious diseases and leukemia combined. 8,376 children were abused in the Dallas-Fort Worth area alone. Today, she's too young to understand. Tomorrow, she may be unable to forget. Find out how you can help by calling Stars for Children at 469-7827.
The New England Patriots today become the first team to implement a drug testing program. The players agreeing to it because of a drug problem on the team. Head coach Raymond Berry saying 4 starters are known to have a problem, others suspected. And while the players initiated this, the union says it will file a grievance and try to stop it. Meanwhile, back in Dallas, Cowboy President Tex Schramm says the NFL should act immediately to get a league-wide testing program in place. It seems to be more in line with what the players want than what the union says.
I think there is a chance of something to that effect happening in the future. I don't believe that drugs should be a part of the NFL in any way. I know that the NFL is a part of society, and society has drugs in it. But I think it would be best for the game and best for the individuals involved if drugs and alcohol were not a part of it.
Do you have any kind of gauge on when you'd like to see something in place, whether it be league-wide or maybe just for your team?
I think we should start it right now. The bargaining, they keep saying, well, we'll bargain it. That's a year from now. That's after next season. I don't think that the drug problem and the health and what that problem represents is something that waits for union negotiations.
We are a team, and the team includes management, coaching staff, and players. And as an entity on that team, we don't want drugs to be a part of it.
Schramm, by the way, is suffering from an eye infection, which explains the patch. And he adds if the league doesn't do anything between now and training camp, the Cowboys will consider their own testing program. 5 new members elected to Pro Football's Hall of Fame today. Former SMU star Doak Walker among them. Fran Tarkenton, Paul Hornung, Willie Lanier, and Kenny Houston. The others, they get inducted on August 2nd. The Rangers and catcher Darrell Porter today agreed to a 1-year contract. Porter hit .221 a year ago in St. Louis and can look forward to backing up Don Slaught. High school hoops in Garland tonight where South Garland tries to keep its unbeaten string alive. Tony Smith scores 18 points. Billy Smith gets 21, and the Colonels are now 27-0. The final, South Garland 65, Highland Park 58. The Quaker State Open starts up tomorrow. The Celebrity Pro-Am today, all of which didn't seem very important considering the day's events until Kevin McCarthy got to Grand Prairie.
A Celebrity Pro-Am story could have been about former Cowboy Jethro Pugh, or Pete O'Brien of the Texas Rangers, or pro wrestler Kerry Von Erich. But the first positive feelings I had after today's Space Shuttle tragedy were because of this young man. He's a 5th grader named Austin Jones who happened to be born with only one hand. Austin normally wears a prosthesis, and that's a big deal to some people, but not to him.
I mean, I just wear it like I would wear my clothes, and I mean, every day I wake up, I put it on, just like a real arm.
He doesn't have, in my opinion, a handicap. He has a challenge. And, he's got a disability, but he's overcome that. He plays baseball and soccer, and he does wall rappelling, and he's been on a swim team. We let him do whatever he thinks he can, and let him be challenged with it.
A lot of people would think that a little boy that doesn't have one arm might shy away and not do sports. Why do you like to do sports so much?
I'm competitive.
Talk to me about that. You got to give me longer answers, Austin. Come on, you're a smart guy.
No, I like to beat people, and I like to prove to them that I can do sports, and I can do better than them.
Being a one-handed athlete has got to be tough sometimes, and being interviewed on television for the first time isn't easy either. But I've got a feeling that Austin can probably do about anything he wants.
Cowboys this year, you were talking about them earlier. What do you think was wrong with the Cowboys?
You tell me.
Well, no, that's your job here.
That's yours.
Austin Jones made my day today. I hope he brightened up yours a little, too. Kevin McCarthy, Channel 4 Sports.
Easily the best part of the day on this side of the desk.
He is quite the young man, isn't he?
Some kid, isn't he? He is some kid.
All right, thanks, Paul.
Attorney General Jim Maddox today declared he would run for re-election against the advice of friends who had urged him to run for governor. The reason, he says, running for governor just didn't feel right at this time. But don't count Maddox out of the running for governor completely. He says he may enter the race for governor or the U.S. Senate in 1990. In other news around the state, education leaders say public education in Texas will cost an additional $430 million in 1998, 1988, even without teacher pay raises. Their solution? Raise taxes. And in Houston, a 3-year-old boy is scheduled to undergo an experimental bone marrow transplant from his mother to try to combat his lack of a natural immunity system. It's the same disease that killed Houston native David the Bubble Boy.
A major story out of Carrollton tonight. Police say they have the man responsible for a much-publicized robbery and murder at a convenience store last November. Channel 4's Bud Gillette reports officers have issued an arrest warrant for Marvin Maurice Wells, who is already in jail.
The attack commanded national headlines, partly because it was captured by a security camera, but mostly because of its unprovoked viciousness. 17-year-old Matt McKay was unaware of the robbery. He was shot and repeatedly kicked. Marvin Maurice Wells is the accused trigger man. He was extradited here from Michigan last week after a grand jury charged him with holding up a Mesquite gasoline station. Channel 4 News has learned pictures from the Carrollton murder helped tie Wells to the Mesquite stick-up. It's believed one man already under arrest for the Mesquite holdup is also a participant in the Carrollton robbery. And a source close to the murder investigation says that Wells has been identified by a witness as being involved in the Carrollton holdup. McKay's mother feared his death might ultimately be an unsolved crime. She spoke today as if Wells was already convicted.
It's a sense of relief to know that he is in custody and he cannot harm anyone else. I feel relieved over it. I think he can get repentance from God, but I believe an eye for an eye, and I believe I am for the death penalty.
Carrollton police are dangling one more lure in their search for information, approximately $18,000 in reward money.
We did not receive information that would result in us paying a reward. There is still a great deal of reward money available to someone should they have information and wish to come forward.
Cole says he is willing to pay for the right information. Bud Gillette, Channel 4 News, Carrollton.
A study by Dallas police indicates nearly half of all violent crimes are the work of repeat offenders. Because of that, there's a growing movement here in Texas to reform our parole laws, to impose longer mandatory sentences on such criminals. Channel 4's Richard Ray has more on that in the second of 3 reports called Fighting Back.
It happened in the kind of upscale neighborhood where such things are not supposed to happen, in broad daylight, a Sunday afternoon. Susan Key was out for a walk when she encountered a man who stepped out of the alley in front of her and waited.
I saw his car there in the alley, and it was at that moment that I realized that I was probably in very grave danger. I tried to start running, but it was too late.
Key was beaten and dragged toward the car. When a neighbor drove up and interrupted the assault, he saw a man pounding Key's head against the concrete. She survived, but it left her with brain damage, vision, and memory loss. This man, Boyd Land, was later convicted in the attack, and his is the sort of story that has police, prosecutors, and victims screaming for changes. Land had been convicted in 2 previous sexual assaults. The first got him probation. The second, 5 years in prison. But he served just 18 months before being released on parole. He was living in a halfway house when he was arrested for nearly killing Susan Key. Overcrowding and federal court orders place tremendous pressure for early release on Texas prisons. A typical inmate serves about 20% of his sentence before being paroled. At the same time, repeat offenders are committing almost half of all violent crimes in Dallas. Police complain they're arresting the same people over and over again.
It gets ridiculous. You get to know them on a first-name basis.
Susan Key is now active with a legislative lobby group dedicated to making reform of the parole system a priority in the next session. Key sees a solution in longer mandatory prison terms, an end to early release for violent offenders.
We lost that war. We tried it, and what we're doing is not working. We are not rehabilitating. We are not sending people back on the streets. prepared to live as honest citizens. We're sending people back on the streets who, again, assault, who murder, who attack, who hurt people.
Rehabilitation did not fail as a methodology. In fact, it has never been truly tried.
Prison reformer Ned Rollo believes mandatory sentencing will not make Dallas a safer place. At least 25 other states have adopted such laws, but Rollo says their experience proves only that it's incredibly expensive, that Texas would have to build a penitentiary every year through the end of the century to handle the increased population.
Whether it's 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, 95 to 98% of all prisoners sent to prison ultimately do return. We don't resolve a problem by ignoring it or by burying it like atomic waste.
There's no question that a mandatory sentencing system would require Texas to build a lot more prison space. But a recent poll indicates about 2/3 of us say we would be willing to pay the price for more prison space, even if it means higher taxes. Richard Ray, Channel 4 News, Huntsville.
When we come back, James Spann will have the breakfast forecast.
And we'll return to Houston, some final observations on this fateful day on the way to outer space.
Nigel Bishop? Leslie Long from New York.
Jolly good. Put him through.
This is Leslie Long.
The one who always telexes?
Yeah. Well, this time I'm calling to discuss an idea.
AT&T International Long Distance Service lets you share ideas in a way that would be impossible by telex. So if you want to pick up your international business, pick up the phone.
Brilliant idea. I've learned quite a bit about Leslie Long.
Nigel, I'm glad I called.
AT&T, the right choice.
When it comes to medical matters, nobody knows it better than Dr. Dinadell. He keeps you in touch with what's hot.
I go one on the earpiece, one on the mouthpiece, and you're all set. No more dirty phone calls for you.
And what's not.
More than half of the time, the patient's doctor is wrong.
And gives you the advice you need.
I think it's very important to realize something fundamental, and I'll repeat it again. Cigarettes are drugs.
Watch Dr. Dinadell, weekdays at 5. We're in touch with your concerns on Channel 4 News.
Over 3 million Americans served our country in Vietnam. Almost 15% were from the state of Texas. 3,244 were killed in action. 161 are still missing in action. In November 1986, Texans will honor those who fought from our state by dedicating the Texas Vietnam Veterans Memorial at the State Fairgrounds in Dallas. Please support the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund of Texas by calling 1-800-626-8877.
The New York Daily News calls it a hot new breakfast show. All it will take is for viewers to discover the new morning news team. Rediscover the CBS Morning News.
How long will this warm, dry weather continue? Here's James with a look at our breakfast forecast.
Suzanne will promise it for one more day. Here's the Wednesday version of the Channel 4 breakfast forecast. At 7 o'clock, mostly fair skies with 50 degrees.
Okay, thank you, James. Channel 4's Clarice Tinsley has been at the Johnson Space Center in Houston all day today.
We will return to her now for some final observations on the day and some of the emotions created by this tragic turn of events. Clarice?
Thank you. It was a very sobering sight to fly into the Johnson Space Center today. It was especially sobering to see the American flags here at half-staff, knowing that this was home of the astronauts. It was very sobering to see that kind of tribute placed to them. Walking around the Space Center today, seeing all the employees who worked here, you could see the anguish and the grief and the pain on their faces. Tonight we are in Building 9A, which is a huge warehouse that houses full-scale replicas of the Space Shuttle Orbiter. There is one in front of me. It is absolutely massive. It is almost impossible to believe that something the size and scale of this space vehicle was literally blown to bits today, but tragically that is what happened. I am standing next to a replica of the shuttle crew compartment, and here you can see 24 decals from the 24 previous space shuttle flights. Each decal is different. It has the name of each mission, the names of the men and women who flew on it. A very simple ceremony would take place here. When the astronauts would return to Earth, come back to Johnson, they would place the decal from their mission here. This space right here. This is where the 25th mission, this is where the decal from today's mission would have been placed by the astronauts upon their return. And it is really a profound sight to stand here and see 24 decals and know the crew from the 25th mission will not be coming back to complete this tradition. Steve, back to you.
Clarice, a personal observation, if I may. You and Bud Gillette had applied for a space shuttle flight. Has this tragedy today given you pause for reflection?
I think it has. I don't want to be in the position to speak for Bud to a great extent, but I know that both of us were, as humans, beyond being a journalist, just as humans as we all are, were really very deeply touched by this tragedy today. When I first heard of the opportunity of having a journalist go into space last year, I was just ecstatic because I've always been interested in space travel. I always thought I wanted to go into space. Filling out the application was very exciting for me. Seeing the video today from the networks, being here at the Johnson Space Center, does put it, understandably, in a completely different perspective for me now. I would like to think that I would still like to be able to do something like a space flight in time, but right now it's just, it's really too painful to really think about doing that. We have to wait and see what the investigation brings out and what kind of answers we can hear.
All right, thank you very much. Tomorrow's another day, and we'll see you then.
That's our report. Thank you for joining us tonight.
We will continue to cover the story of Challenger tomorrow, the investigation, the impact, and more. Walter Evans will have our first report at 6 a.m. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Well, I'm hoping that as they look at me and they see what I've accomplished, because I just took that chance, along with 11,000 other people, that it will give them maybe the inspiration to try something new and to take a chance on something, even though they're not sure they're going to get it.
I can't think of a word to describe it. It's just devastating.
The possibility that everybody has died.
Obviously a major malfunction.
And what we can do now is make sure that we carry their memories in carrying on.
We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them, this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye, and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God.
Channel 4 News was recorded earlier this evening.